on
Yeah.
Olivia's question. Now, you said, to understand clearly, you're saying that if Iran responds, the U.S. will be there to defend Israel, correct?
What I'm saying is that our commitment to Israel's security is ironclad, and of course, part of that includes the defense of Israel when it faces threats from malign actors like the Iranian regime. That should be no surprise to you, Saeed.
So you often speak of the rights of every nation to defend itself. Do you acknowledge that this was an Israeli aggression against Iran?
I don't have any information for you, Said, on this incident or possible reactions, and certainly don't have anything to offer as it relates to attribution, and would let the Israelis speak to any operation of theirs that they may be undertaking. I don't have a perspective to offer.
It seems that the whole world acknowledges that this was an Israeli aggression on the capital of Iran. But suppose, when you develop the proper information to say that Israel was behind this aggression on the Iranian capital, it is within Iran's right to defend itself?
I'm not going to speculate on this, Saeed. I don't have an update or an assessment to offer for you as it relates to attribution, and so I will just leave it at that.
Okay. In principle, as a sovereign nation, does Iran have the right to defend itself?
Saeed,
it's a simple question. Does Iran, as a sovereign nation, as any other nation, does it have the right to defend itself?
Iran is a regime that time and time again, since 1979, has been the largest and greatest exporter of terrorism, not just in the Middle East, but broadly. And it has a clear track record of not just suppressing its own people, but also funding, promoting, encouraging malign, destabilizing actions across the region. And our opinion and point of view on the Iranian regime is quite clear, and we will not hesitate to not just stand with our allies and partners when it comes to defending against threats from Iran, but also taking appropriate action from the United States as it stands.
So you're saying that the nature of the Iranian regime strips it of the right to defend itself and to defend
Said, I just don't have any assessment to offer on this.
No, you just said that.
I don't have any assessment to offer on this incident. I don't have any assessment on attribution.
Let me ask you something. You talked about the deal that is underway, the negotiations. Now, is there any doubt that the Israeli Prime Minister have taken almost every step to scuttle the negotiations over the past few months?
So,
do you have any doubt in your mind that he has taken those?
I'm not going to speak for Prime Minister Netanyahu, Saeed, and I will let him speak for himself. But in general, what I can say is that we have seen the Israelis engaged and constructive in conversations that we have been having about a ceasefire deal. And so we continue to believe both that a ceasefire deal is both achievable and urgent, and it is something that our partners in Israel want. I'm not going to speak to the specificity of the ongoing process beyond that.
Okay, but Mr. Haniyeh was the chief negotiator. He was the chief negotiator involved in these negotiations. So when Israel first kills his grandchildren, then kills all his children, then kills him, does that send like a clear message that they don't want these negotiations? He is the chief negotiator, correct?
Said, I will say again, as I've said to Daphne and others, I'm not going to speculate on this as it relates to how it may or may not impact a ceasefire deal. What I can say is that the United States unequivocally is focused on continuing its work to close the gaps. We think that getting a deal done is not just in the United States' interest, it's in the region's interest, it's in Israel's interest, it's in the interest of the Palestinian people. We are talking about creating the conditions so the remaining hostages can return home, that there can be an influx of humanitarian aid, and getting this region out of this endless cycle of violence. So that's what we're going to remain focused on. And as I said to Olivia and others, when it comes to continuing to engage in these conversations, there continue to be ways in which we can continue to engage with Hamas and Israel appropriately as it relates to the contours of the deal. And that work, I have no doubt, will continue.
Okay, let me ask you, a basic question. As far as the negotiations are concerned, is the killing of Mr. Haniyeh good, bad, or indifferent in your view?
I am not going to speculate, again, for what is probably now the 15th time. I am not going to speculate on...
I'm just saying, how is it likely to impact?
Again, I'm just not going to speculate on that. What I can speak to is what the United States is doing and what the United States is focused on. And what we are doing and what we are focused on is working to close the gaps. We continue to believe a deal is achievable. We think it's urgent, and we continue to work at this around the clock.
Okay, I promise that it's my last.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you feel that killing Haniyeh complicates the negotiations further?
Said, you literally just asked me a version of that question.
Is
Willie,
this
go
likely
ahead.
an event that
Go ahead, Willie.
Very similar
Go ahead,
to
Willie.
Said. I mean, you mentioned that Israel, in your eyes, has shown a willingness or that it is a priority to get a deal done. But, I mean, certainly eliminating the person that you're trying to get a deal done with suggests that it's not a priority.
So, look, Willie, I don't have an assessment to offer as it relates to attribution, and I'm certainly not going to speak for the Israelis or any other government or entity as it relates to this. What I can say is that the United States is squarely focused on is getting a deal done. It is the message that the Secretary is carrying in the conversations that he's having with world leaders and counterparts, some of which that we just talked about, and that's what we are focused on. We continue to believe a deal is achievable and urgent, and we're going to have our team continue to work tirelessly to close those gaps.
Just shifting, in the wake of the Haniyeh killing, is there any posturing or concern of embassies in the region or elsewhere right now, security-wise?
So look, take this situation, put the situation aside for a second, Willie. We take the safety of all our personnel, not just State Department personnel, but any personnel, American personnel, incredibly seriously. We take the safety of our embassies and our facilities and our installations incredibly seriously, and constantly around the clock, we are always assessing circumstances on the ground. We are assessing what risk levels are, what threat levels are, and appropriately we will make adjustments on those as we need to. We certainly aren't going to read out that operational process from here. That would kind of be counterproductive. But what I can say is that this is not just tantamount of importance to the Secretary of State. I know it is also of importance to not just the President, but the Secretary of Defense and other executives across this interagency who may or may not have personnel abroad. So this is something that we are paying very close attention to. Yeah, go ahead, Daphne.
You said that you've seen Israel engage in constructive conversations about a ceasefire deal. Is it still your assessment today that they're engaging constructively?
That is still our assessment. I'm not going to speak to specific negotiation processes, but that continues to be our assessment. Go ahead.
So, saying nothing about the eventual outcome of the talks or progress towards a ceasefire hostage release deal, can you say if, given the response from key mediators, from Hamas, will the assassination lead to at least a pause in the talks?
So, that is not our understanding at the moment, but beyond that, I'm not going to speculate on the impacts here. To say for also probably the 15th time, our focus is on working to close this gap, the gaps that exist, and continuing to work to get this deal done. When we say that this is of vital importance to the region, that is not hyperbole. That we legitimately think that to be true, not just in the context of Israel and Gaza, but also when we were talking about destability across the region. We think that a ceasefire deal has the potential to be beneficial in addressing that situation writ large as well.
Has there been any direct or indirect conversations between the U.S. and Iran following the assassination?
I'm not aware of any diplomatic conversations. No. Go ahead, Alex. Actually, before I come to you, does anybody else have any? Go ahead, Ravi. I know, Alex, I'm sure you have a wide geography to cover, so I just want to close out this region of the world before we come to you. Yeah.
Follow up on the assassination of Haniyeh and implication on the Gaza ceasefire talks. Actually, one of the mediators, Qatar's Foreign Minister Al-Thani, today asked a question, which is that how can mediation succeed when one party assassinates the negotiator on the other side? What is your response to this?
So, look, again, I'm not a spokesperson for the Qatari Foreign Ministry. I will let the Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs speak to his own comments. What I can say is that the Secretary and the Prime Minister had a constructive call earlier today where the Secretary reiterated again the need for getting a ceasefire done. The Secretary reiterated the United States' commitment to continuing to work to close these gaps and to get a deal across the finish line for all the reasons that I talked about.
One more. Yeah. So on the attacks in Beirut and Tehran, are you concerned that this complicates the ceasefire talks?
So first, to take a little bit of a step back, we have, of course, seen the news and the statement from Hamas, but I don't have anything additional to offer on that. And I don't want to speculate at this time about this incident or possible reactions. We, of course, continue to be in touch with governments in the region. You all have seen calls from the Secretary, readouts of calls that he's had with regional partners. Our priority continues to be to promote diplomatic solutions for a more peaceful, secure, and integrated region. And that, of course, includes continuing to engage and work very hard to close the remaining gaps as it relates to a ceasefire in Gaza. Getting this deal done, bringing the hostages home, getting an influx of humanitarian aid, ending the violence in Gaza, it remains incredibly important. And I'm not going to speculate on any potential impacts. It continues to be a priority for the United States. We know it's a priority for regional partners. We know it's a priority for Israel, and so we'll continue to work at it.
Both Qatar and Egypt, which have acted as mediators in talks, suggested that the killing of the Hamas leader in Tehran could further jeopardize efforts to secure a truce in Gaza. Do you share that concern?
So, as I just said, I'm just not going to speculate on any impacts here.
How can you move the talks forward at this point, given everything that's gone on in the past 24 hours?
We spoke a little bit about this yesterday, Daphne. I'm not going to speak to the specific inner workings of the ongoing negotiation process and the effort that is continuing to be done underway to close these gaps and to get this deal done. It's something that we're going to remain focused on, but I'm not going to get into more specifics beyond that.
And then we reported that the U.S. was seeking to deter Israel from striking Beirut in retaliation for the attack over the weekend. Do you feel Israel has ignored your warnings, and what conversations have you had with Israel today?
So just to reiterate what you heard the Secretary say in an interview in Singapore, we were not involved in this mission or operation, and certainly I'm not going to get into specific private diplomatic discussions. What I can say is that our priority region-wide continues to be promoting diplomatic solutions for a more peaceful and secure region. That's what we're going to continue to remain focused on. Those have been at the core tenets of the conversations that the Secretary has had in the past half a day in the region, continuing to talk to counterparts about ways we can continue to push and make a ceasefire happen, and that's what we'll keep focus on.
Has he spoken with, or will he speak with Israeli counterparts?
I don't have any calls to preview at this time, Daphne. As you guys have saw, he had the opportunity to speak to his counterparts in Qatar as well as Jordan, and per usual, any other call readouts that we have, we'll make sure to share those with you. Olivia, go ahead.
Thank you, John. We understand that the Israelis provided a heads up ahead of the Beirut strike. Was a heads up provided to the United States ahead of the targeting of Haniyeh?
So what I can just say, Olivia, is that this is not something that we were involved in, and I'm not going to get into more specific diplomatic conversations beyond that.
Okay. And I know that you're not speculating about the fallout from here, but does the U.S. view this as a step as conducive to finalizing a ceasefire deal?
Again, I think that's asking me to speculate on something in another way. I'm just not going to speculate on this. We are clear-eyed and focused on what the United States' priorities are and what we would like to see happen, and that is a continued focus on the diplomacy. Our team is continuing to work very hard to narrow and close the gaps. We continue to believe a deal is possible. Getting a deal done is of vital importance for so many reasons that I've spent much of this week talking about, whether it be bringing hostages home, whether it's getting an influx of humanitarian aid, being able to partake in diplomacy to get this region out of endless cycles of violence. So for all those reasons and more, this is incredibly important, and we'll remain focused on that.
So without looking ahead, looking backwards, how essential had Haniyeh been in these discussions? I mean, we know that ultimately Yahya Sinwar was signing off on decisions that Hamas was making, but